The courtroom doors creaked open like church doors that hadn't heard prayer in years. One by one they filed in, the family who had once shared the same home, the same faith, the same dream. But now they wouldn't even have the same look. Kody sat at the defense table in a dark gray suit that fit poorly. He looked smaller in some way, as if the weight of all the sermons he ever gave rested on his shoulders. Robin sat on his right, her Bible clutched so hard her knuckles were white. The other wives huddled across the room, together but not together, close enough to share a memory, far enough to create distance. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, rose and said, "This case isn't about religion. It's about responsibility and the choices people make when they believe they're above the law." The words hung in the air. Janelle whispered something under her breath, Christine's eyes glistened, and Meri's expression was carved from years of regret. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Let's proceed." And just like that, the trial of the Church of Broken Vows began. When finally truth bursts in, even faith trembles. The first witness was a Salt Lake City financial investigator. She unfurled a map of accounts showing the way millions quietly passed through donations made by church members, funds that ended up in the Browns' own businesses. The Order of Eternal Unity was not merely a church, she described. It was a money web posing as a spiritual mission. Robin's head shook, and she whispered to her lawyer. Kody's jaw hardened. The prosecutor turned to the jury. "We have a reason to believe not all of the wives were aware of these exchanges," she said. "But someone was." Christina's mouth narrowed in a pinched line. Months before the trial, Shed received an anonymous envelope. It had receipts from transactions and a note that read, "He said it was God's will." Shed destroyed the note but not the memory. Sometimes silence is louder than any confession. Protesters wailed outside, screaming and brandishing signs that stated faith over fear and justice for the wives. Reporters shouted out questions, hungry for pieces of the truth. Inside, the family's world contracted to four walls, one judge, and one truth that would no longer be concealed. When Kody's turn arrived, he stood slowly. "I've spent my life serving God," he stated. "Everything that I did was done for my family and his kingdom." The prosecutor stepped forward. "Then inform us, Mr. Brown, who ordered you to create those hidden accounts?" He hesitated. His eyes shot toward Robin, but her hands did not move. The silence was heavy until the judge spoke his name once more. "It wasn't me," Kody finally said. "It was as per the church's directive. We had been instructed to listen to the prophet." "Which prophet?" she demanded. He answered low-voiced, "My father." And suddenly the trial was no longer about law but about legacy. Meri's head dropped and a tear slipped down her cheek. Christine covered her mouth as the courtroom gasped. The prophet, Kody's father, had founded their church decades ago. If Kody's testimony was true, then this wasn't only about money, it was about generations of obedience and fear disguised as faith. The prosecutor's voice faltered. "You're saying your father told you to keep the money a secret?" Kody nodded. "He said it was sacred. That outsiders wouldn't understand. That God blesses those who protect his truth." For one moment, the courtroom was a confessional. The wives, the attorneys, the strangers watching all felt the same thing. This family's religion was never about love. It was about control. The judge banged his gavel. "We'll reconvene in the morning." The crowd dispersed and Christine lingered, her eyes on Kody's receding back as he whispered to Robin. Meri glided past her without a glance. Flashbulbs exploded out front. Journalists shouted her name. "Christine, did you know about the money? Christine, are you still a believer?" She didn't answer. She just breathed softly. "We were all believers once." Sometimes the most difficult thing about losing your faith is knowing that it was never yours to lose in the first place. Morning was heavy and gray, the kind of morning that doesn't hold any promise of good things. The courthouse steps were already swarming with reporters, cameras poised like vultures. Within, the family didn't meet each other's eyes. There was no prayer circle, no quiet solidarity before the storm. Only silence. Christine sat alone on the end bench, clutching her coffee cup like it could hold back her shaky hands. She had barely slept. The moment she closed her eyes, Kody's face popped into her mind when he uttered those words, "My father told me to do it." Janelle followed, walking briskly, eyes fixed on the ground. She didn't even glance at Christine. Robin lagged behind with her attorney in tow, muttering in small tight sentences that sounded like damage control. Meri trailed behind, late as always, wearing the same coat she'd worn the day before. She had a scent of rain and stale perfume. The trial resumed around 10. Kody sat bolt upright this time, trying to look tough, but the tremble in his hand betrayed him. The prosecutor wasted no time. She brought out fresh evidence, aiming at the wives this time. Documents signed by them appeared on the screen. Christina's eyes widened. She recognized her handwriting. So did Janelle. The prosecutor spoke with a firm but crisp voice. All of you approved these authorizations, she informed them. These transfers diverted over $300,000 from the church fund into your family trust accounts in secret. Christina's gut churned. She remembered signing a stack of documents years ago, trusting Kody when he said it was for insurance. Now she was being told that she had unknowingly been a part of a scam. She wished she could shout, but the courtroom muffled all sound. The worst thing about lies is that you are included without knowing. Janelle bent forward, her voice barely above a whisper. We didn't know. You know that, don't you? Christine nodded hesitantly, watching Kody with an intense stare. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the ceiling and blinking so fast, like a man trying to pray a fire away. The prosecutor moved closer. Brown, you explained to us that your father instructed you to take care of the church's money. Were these signatures a function of taking care of them? Kody hesitated and answered they didn't know. They trusted me. They trusted the process. The prosecutor smiled, but not a friendly one. So you admit that you exploited their trust. Kody's mouth dropped open, but nothing came out. For the first time, the courtroom witnessed some doubt in his arrogance. He looked at Robin, and Robin finally spoke up, her voice shaking but firm. We thought we were following God's plan. Christine felt something burn in her chest. Believed, she thought. It was once a word with something sweet. Now it only sounded like an excuse. The judge asked for a minute's recess. The family separated into the courthouse corners. Christine stepped out into the hall and stood in front of Meri. Glass suspended between them in mid-air. Meri spoke. You think he's lying, don't you? Christine remained silent. Be careful, she said to him. They're watching everything. Christina's eyebrow was furrowed. Who are they? But Meri had already proceeded on down the hall. Later in the day, the prosecutor brought out something different. A letter. Ripped and yellowed, found in the basement of the old church building. She showed it to the judge, who read it silently before handing it over to Kody's attorney. The defense objected, but the judge allowed it. The prosecutor cleared her throat. It was 10 years old, written by a member of the church. It quotes money transfers, coded messages, and a threat that one of the wives planned to report the prophet to the feds. Kody's head shot up. His voice cracked. Who wrote it? The prosecutor smiled weakly. The signature was burned off. But we did find DNA stains on the envelope. Secrets always have a way of returning, even after being entombed for years in silence. The courtroom stilled. Christina's breath was caught. Janelle's eyes scanned face after face. Robin's mouth fell open in shock. Meri remained still. The prosecutor went on. Our lab verified the DNA is of somebody sitting in this courtroom. One of the sister wives. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. Kody's lawyer demanded names, but the prosecutor held firm. We'll present our findings tomorrow. The interview ended in disarray. Cameras clicked as the family departed. Each shouted question sounded harsher, louder, uglier. Christine walked directly to her car, dodging them all. She turned the key in the ignition, but her hand still shook. Her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She answered without a thought. A warped voice spoke, "Stop looking for the truth. You gave it to them years ago." The phone went dead. Christine sat there immobile. The words echoed in her mind like a jeer. She had no clue what they were talking about. But on some primal level, she was certain that this was only the beginning. Someone was playing both sides, and whoever they were, they weren't finished. That night, the news broadcast clips of the trial. Commentators debated which of them the whistleblower could be. The internet was awash with speculation, screenshots, reruns of old footage from the show, old interviews spliced together into evidence. Christine turned off the television. She looked at the framed picture on her mantel, all of them together smiling, pretending that everything was all right. She whispered, I thought leaving him was liberation. But I'm still in his story. The past doesn't end when you depart from it. It ends when it runs out of secrets. She stayed by herself in the dark, gripping her phone, expecting it to ring again. The next morning, the courthouse was more subdued than usual, as if the walls themselves were inhaling their breath. All of the seats available in the gallery were filled. The air was heavy with whispers. Reporters whispered rumors, lawyers shuffled papers, and in the rear of the courtroom Christine sat frozen. She hadn't slept. The voice on the phone haunted her mind. Stop looking for the truth. You already gave it to them years ago. What had she given them? What did it mean? Kody entered last, white and gaunt face. Robin was with him, lips pursed, fists together in front of her. Meri and Janelle sat on either side, both pretending to read notes that had no meaning. When the judge came in, they stood up. The gavel came down once. The ring was absolute. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, we're ready to proceed. The results from the forensic lab have been confirmed. The DNA found on the letter envelope belongs to one of the defendants. The courtroom went still. Even the air felt like it stopped moving. The prosecutor continued. The DNA belongs to Meri Brown. Christine turned around. Meri did not move. Not even a blink. Not even a breath. Kody's mouth was agape, his face incredulous. The judge called for quiet, but the grumbling filled the room. Meri finally raised her head, her gaze locked with the prosecutor's. Her words, when she could find them, were monotone and low. That letter was not meant for the police. And sometimes the last person you expect to break the silence is the one who waited the longest to speak. The prosecutor asked her to explain, and Meri did. She said she'd written the letter a decade earlier, when she'd first heard that money was missing from their communal accounts. She'd been scared. The church was powerful, and Kody's dad controlled everything. She confessed she had planned to hand the evidence to authorities but burned the note instead after the prophet warned her what would happen if she turned against him. The prosecutor asked what that warning was. Meri's voice cracked. He said, God punishes disobedient wives in ways men can't. The courtroom returned to silence. Janelle swiped at her eyes. Robin leaned over and whispered something to Kody, but he didn't react. His expression was stone. The judge inquired of Meri whether she was the one who had been sending evidence to detectives this time. Meri paused. No, she replied softly. But perhaps someone discovered what I was too scared to hand over. Christina's breast tightened. The letter, the transfers, the call, they were all converging. She looked at Meri, praying she was lying or finally free. The prosecutor nodded and turned to Kody once more. Brown, you've heard your wife testify. Did you know about the money that went missing a decade ago? Kody shook his head. My father handled church finances. I was simply following orders. The prosecutor's eyes tightened. Even when he passed away, Kody's mouth had opened, but he remained silent. Robin's hold on his arm turned white-knuckled. The closer to the truth, the more tightly people grasped their lies. The prosecutor laid down more papers, payments made since Kody's father died, authored by Kody himself. Each page was like another nail driven into the coffers of the family. Christine could feel her heart pounding in her throat. She wanted him to deny it, to fight, to bring out some trace of the man who had offered them a kingdom built on love. But he just went on staring dead ahead, hollow. When the court adjourned for lunch this afternoon, reporters flooded into the hall. Christine slid out a side door, attempting to get away, but Meri stood waiting at the stairwell. You believe me now? She queried. Christine nodded uncertainly. Why did you not tell us then? Meri smiled unhappiness. Because we were all too scared to lose him. Now I think we've lost everything already. The defense summoned Robin as a witness later in the day. She walked to the stand shaking, eyes glassy. Her lawyer queried, ever receive information about money laundering or concealed accounts? Robin's head shook. Never. Everything that I did because I trusted my husband and our belief. She paused, then fixed on Kody. But I no longer defend what I don't understand anymore. There was a gasp in the room. Kody's gaze blazed. He sucked a sharp breath. Don't do this. Robin's voice gathered strength. I have to. The prosecutor stood up and stepped forward. Mrs. Brown, did you ever wonder at the prophet's instructions? Robin hesitated, then whispered softly once. After he died, I found letters in Kody's office, letters that verified the prophet had misled the visions that explained our family's wealth. But I destroyed them. I was afraid. Guilt smolders longer than fire, but both scar the same way. Christine felt her eyes stinging with tears. For the first time, she saw Robin as more than the opponent she had always hated, but as another prisoner of faith. Janelle placed her hand over Christina's. None of this was winning. This was defeat carved into stone. The prosecutor concluded questioning. The judge dismissed Robin from the witness stand. The courtroom emptied once more for the day, but the silence that lingered was thicker than any noise. Outside, thunder boomed across the horizon, beating like distant drums. Reporters clumped, shouting for quotes, but the wives walked past them in silence, for women bound by the same pain. That night, Christine sat alone in her kitchen, dark, phone face down on the counter. She replayed the words over and over in her head. You already gave it to them years ago. What had she given them? The thought hit her, seemingly out of thin air. Those faded tax returns she'd signed, the ones she never looked at, the same ones now used as evidence. Maybe that was it. Maybe she'd been the answer herself and didn't even know it. She looked out the window. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the world outside. Somewhere deep inside, anger started to build, not at Kody or the prophet, but at herself for ever believing blind faith could save anyone. Sometimes redemption only comes by letting the truth annihilate what's left. She breathed into the blackness, tomorrow I speak. And for the first time she was not frightened. Only resolve. The day of Christina's testimony was standing at the edge of a storm. The courthouse doors loomed above, ponderous as if alive. She'd dreamed of this day for years. Not the trial, not the news cruise, but when she could say her truth without fear. But when she entered the room, her heart pounded so rapidly it was like it could break her ribcage. She caught a glimpse of Kody in the front, frantically whispering with his lawyer. Robin refused to meet her eyes. Janelle nodded by inches. Not encouragement, just acknowledgement. Meri sat rigidly, staring at the floor. The judge entered. The bailiff called out, Christine Brown, up please. She ascended slowly, every step a drumbeat. She swore the oath, her voice barely audible. The prosecutor moved in. Mrs. Brown, how long were you a member of the Church of Eternal Unity? Christina's throat closed. 23 years, she answered. And for all those years, did you embrace the prophet's doctrines? She nodded. I embraced everything. The prosecutor's voice was soft. Tell us why. Christine took a breath. Because I wanted to believe. Because believing made me not alone. Obedience was love, we were taught. That the prophet was speaking for God. That Kody was chosen to lead us. And when you love someone who tells you God chose them, you stop questioning the price tag. Faith blinds you more completely than any lie, because you willingly closed your eyes. The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor asked, when did you start doubting? Christina's voice was shaking. The first time it happened was when the money was stolen. I asked Kody where it was. He told me it was for church missions. But the prophet spent money on new cars, new properties, and we were told to pray for more donations. I tried to convince myself that it was holy work. Then one night, her voice trembled. And then I heard Kody arguing on the phone one evening. They will never know if we keep the books in family trust, he said. She looked down. That's when it hit me, we weren't building a church. We were building an empire. The prosecutor handed her a sheet of paper. Is this your signature? Christine nodded. Did you know what you were signing? No, she whispered. He told me it was insurance papers. But it was a transfer form, wasn't it? Christina's tears began to fall. Yes. The prosecutor took a step closer. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Because I was afraid, she explained. Because when you leave a man who announces himself to be a prophet, you don't leave just him behind, you leave behind the world he has made for you. And I was afraid of having nothing if I left that world behind. The scariest part of freedom is seeing how long you've been in a cage. The prosecutor nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. No more questions. Kody's attorney rose. His tone was curt, defensive. Mrs. Brown, you indicate you were terrified of my client. Did he ever physically harm you? Christine shook her head. So then all your terror was emotional? Spiritual? Christine paused. Yes. The attorney sneered. So this is guilt, not crime. Christina's eyes grew cold. It's the lying. You want to talk about regret? I regret loving a man who used God's name to cover his greed. The lawyer stepped back. The judge called for the room to be brought into line as mutterings swept the courtroom. Kody's eyes blazed. For the first time he spoke to her in person. Christine, you're twisting everything. You're angry because you couldn't stomach the truth. Christine slowly turned to him. The truth? She asked. The truth is, you built a church using dishonesty and used our religion as bricks. You traded our children's futures for power. And now you want to call it God's will? Halfway up, Kody was pulled back down by his lawyer. The judge warned him to keep quiet. The air was thick enough to choke on. Then the prosecutor spoke again. Your Honor, we'd like to introduce new evidence. A USB drive, recovered from the prophet's former assistant. The screen flickered to life, grainy video footage time-stamped from years ago. Christina's heart stopped. There, on the screen sat Kody seated across from the prophet, both of them laughing. The prophet had said, as long as the wives believe, the money flows. Keep them faithful and God will keep you rich. Kody nodded, smiling. Faith is the best investment we've got. Gasps filled the courtroom. Kody didn't move. Robin covered her face with her hands. Meri's shoulders shook silently. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives in the echo of your own voice. The gavel came down, the judge calling for order, but the damage was done. All eyes in the courtroom swiveled towards Kody, the prophet's golden boy, the man who claimed to be pure. Now caught in the act, laughing at their piety. Christine had a jarring feeling of peace. She'd been afraid of this reality for years. Now that everyone knew she didn't quite break apart, she felt purified. She descended from the stand on steady feet, her shoulders set. The reporters shouted her name outside the courthouse, but she continued. The air was easier now, as if she could breathe again. She listened to the tumult rising behind her. Lawyers shouting, cameras clicking, Kody's voice calling out above all. She walked out to her car, the dark sky turbulent above. Her phone rang again. The same unknown number. She paused, then answered. A whisper. You think the prophet's gone? He left more than one heir. Then the line went dead. Christine remained frozen in the parking lot, wind whipping her hair. The world was wider, darker, full of noises she hadn't heard yet. Just when you think the storm has passed, you discover that you were only in its eye. She looked back at the courthouse, lights shining behind the windows, and sighed softly, let it come. I'm ready.